I'm here for the next episode of the PowerLess podcast with Zaq Baker, who is a musician, songwriter, a multi-instrumentalist, and now, as of January, right, this is when the book first came out, first-time author. So congrats on the release of your first book. How's everything been with the release of the book over the last couple of months and all that?
Yeah, well, Brandon, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Things have been good. It's been a crazy, crazy, crazy year. I've been touring the novel, which is called Unspectacular. I've done 2 tours already this year, both in the Midwest, and then I'm going out for 2 weeks doing the East Coast in June. So I do sets of my original Zaq Baker songs, like it's just a rock show. And then I'm like, well, guys, the merch is this book that I spent 3 years writing. And that's been really fun. So when you ask how the book release has been going, that's been most of it. It's tour planning and then hitting the road and getting it on bookshelves where I live in Minnesota.
Yeah, I gotta imagine, because I know you've been, and sorry, I think I said Barker at the beginning of this. You can tell I do these usually in the evening. Zaq Baker, I'm so sorry about that.
Extra letters with bonus points,
Yeah, that's how it works in Scrabble. It's how it works in real life, right? Yeah.
Well, ZAQ is like killer in Scrabble. You
Yeah,
can't do proper nouns, but if you could, it'd be killer.
yeah, that would be that. Yeah, no kidding. But I am interested in that. I'm going to turn my mic down a little bit. Holy cow! I am interested in that. Just like as someone who's done touring, and so I know you've done a lot of stuff as a solo artist. I know that's how you kind of got in contact with me to do this, is Cat in the Hurricane from touring and
Love that.
kind of staying in each other's places and things like that when you're on tour, which is really cool. Like, I guess, like, what's the difference here a little bit when it comes to the book? I know you said you kind of do your original songs, and I'm sure you kind of talk about like you said, talk about the book a little bit here and there, but what's kind of like been the response when you do those sorts of things? Are people like engaged in this? Because I think it's really cool. I haven't really I've of course read like music books, like about like a band's tour and all the craziness they do, or landmark biographies and all that kind of stuff. But I think this is like a really unique novel that I think a lot of musicians and people in the music scene, above all people that are like invested in music, would really appreciate and get a lot out of. So I guess, like, what's been the response there, both when you go on tour, or just when people have picked up the book? What's been the response from musicians, from just readers in general?
On tour, the response has been really heartwarming. It's been really exciting. The first Midwest leg we did was in February, and the first show was in Milwaukee. It was awesome. We played at X-Ray Arcade. That place is sick. It's like a big, big bar with a ton of pinball and stuff.
Uh-huh.
Played with some great local acts. And it was the first night of book tour, and I ended up being very flustered because I'm used to being like, I have t-shirts, hopefully people buy them, and being kind of like not, I don't know, like you don't expect people to like swamp you with interest in your stickers and stuff necessarily. And people just like wouldn't stop coming up to the table saying they were interested. And it was like, I couldn't find like my square reader. I couldn't find a pen to like sign them. I couldn't find small bills because I didn't like expect people to be so psyched about it. And they kind of just didn't stop like coming up and being like, you played this whole set of your original music. I can't believe you like did a book too. And that it was just very like, I didn't like see it coming. I had to kind of get my stuff together. So I was like, I need to make sure my square reader works. Like played Madison the next night. So yeah, the response has been really cool. I didn't really plan it this way, but people's interest in the multidisciplinary thing, I think, has made it really exciting. Because again, it's like they see you play and they're like, oh, your songs are all very narrative. Like if you have this whole book, maybe that fits into your kind of like worldview as well. And I think it's a differentiator. I just think there's fewer people probably who like play in a band and wrote a book. There are a bunch of us, but it's different.
Let alone being, going on tour, playing shows, and then people come over and, you talk about the book, and then people come over and buy a book at the show, right? Like, you can talk, like you said earlier, especially like a little bit of more established or, bigger artists. Like the first one that comes to mind, just because I read her book not that long ago, was Laura Jane Grace from Against Me. Her book, like, you wouldn't necessarily see her, you know, on tour. Maybe she does this at her solo shows or something, but as an example, doing that, people realizing you have a book and then going over and ending up buying a book at like a local show, right? Like, that's a very, from my perspective, maybe you've seen that, but I haven't seen that very often. So that's just like a very unique, cool thing that I'm sure also helps people kind of remember it a little bit more as well, and come back to the book and your music, right?
Yeah, it's also kind of funny, like the guitarist who plays in my band is like my closest friend, like, we did a book release show in town at the end of January to celebrate the book release, and it was funny because it's like playing shows is just kind of what we do. I didn't even think it was, like, notable or a differentiator to be like, I spent 3 years writing a novel. It is now finally published. It exists. So, like, the thing we do is, like, we just play a rock show. I didn't even realize that that was, like, worth noting, but he was like, "Well, that's just what we do when you celebrate things." Like, I do a birthday show sometimes, like, album release, you do it. So to me, getting the, like, performance art piece to dovetail with, like, a written thing was just like, "Yep, that's what we do." You know? And so it's made the tours really fun.
Yeah, and it like I know I a lot of times I say too many words when I'm giving explanations, but in general, like it is a cool, cohesive, complementary thing because of the content of the book as well, right? Like I guess to kind of get into that a little bit, obviously you've said you've been a musician for a long time. I believe you've released, is it eight? Right? Am I right on that? Or no, 6 albums, 8 standalone singles, and I know you released one. What was it in February? Was your most recent single on Spotify?
Valentine's Day.
Uh, yeah, yeah. So I mean, you're very prolific in songwriting. What had you first kind of have this idea? Where did the idea come together for? I guess I should actually show it on the screen for Unspectacular.
I got the cover, sick.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's going to be in the back here after this episode too for the
Oh, there you
backdrop.
go.
What was kind of the idea of doing this? Was it a lot of your own personal experience going into this and kind of having this idea of like sort of a music narrative and kind of cultural critique? Like, where did the idea for this book kind of form for you?
Yeah, I had always wanted to write a novel, right? I mean, if you're like a kid who grows up really bookish, it's probably just the kind of thing you like fantasize about. You know, I was like a Narnia kid. I was
Mhm.
always just like reading, and it always felt like this kind of like higher art form that would be really, really, really cool to try one day. And music has just been like my form of expression and my lifestyle since I was like 15, you know, since like the first pop punk band, I was like, "Hey, we want you to play piano in our band." And I was like, "Okay, now this is like going to be my life. You know, this is what I want out of life." And I think toward the end of 2021, I mean, first of all, by that point, I think I'd released like 50 songs probably, which, as you know, because you live in my world, it's like that means I wrote like way more than that, right? It's like I've written more songs than I don't know, like probably than I thought was possible just by quantity. And then art form wise, I was like, okay, maybe I really want to try this other thing that I've been fantasizing about for so long. So then novel was the thing that like really, really made sense, you know? And I think too, my songs are so narrative and like the pop song as a form is like something I admire so much. I was like, man, my songs are getting like too verbal or I'm trying to fit like too much story into like 4 minutes. So it's like,
Right.
maybe it's time to see if I can really make, you know, my kind of storytelling voice work with a different art form.
Yeah, and I think all of that makes a lot of sense. And again, not to beat a dead horse here, but I think that kind of proliferation in music, having those narrative based songs as well, is sort of like dipping your toes into writing characters, right? Like, even if you're telling from personal experience or whatever the case may be, you're able to kind of, and it's difficult in a song in a different way than a book. Where a book you have to do a lot more planning out and a lot of long form. I'm sure planning, especially in the format that you put this book together in, but it kind of gets you on that level of like creating something or possibly creating like these man, what's the word I'm looking for here, these narratives and kind of structures that are outside of the normal like personal experience solely, or in my case with the music that I do, yelling about politics 24/7 or something, right? That like that,
Which is a
right?
good thing. It's a good
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
we need all of these different things, right? But did you find that kind of that very narrative based songwriting, did that directly kind of form into how you wrote this book? Did you find that it was a completely different monster with how you have to plan it? Like what was kind of the connection there between songwriting and the way that you wrote this book?
Definitely a completely different, and I wouldn't use the word monster because at times it felt like it. So I'm like, "Oh my god, that's almost triggering with how, like, daunting it is."
I
Mapping out a
bet.
well, I got fond of saying during the writing process is like, however hard you think it would be to write a book, it's, like, way harder than that. There's just a lot of different, like, moving parts that you have to get to fit together. But to answer your question, I think I realized like a long way through writing that of the book that my songwriting was kind of a way of like gearing up for that, which I didn't know at the time. Like you can't see into the future like this is what my art form is gonna like drive me to end up doing. But so many of my songs are like third person narrative where I had to like imagine a character and like what their problems are first. So you're not just writing lyrics, you have to like zoom out first and be like, what is she dealing with? Like what is the crap that's going on in like family dynamics or like workplace or whatever, and then write a song about it. So I don't think I knew then that that was kind of a way to like gestate a book also. So sort of it's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
framing
yeah.
it a little bit like I don't
I,
know.
I think I think it's probably possible, especially with somebody like you who again has put out so many different songs and as you said has had narrative building at the forefront of a lot of them and storytelling and things of that nature. Is you can, if you're good at songwriting or you do it a lot, it can become like second nature to you where it's like, I've got my song, what's something that I can pull from inspirationally that can help me write a story, whatever the case may be. We're like, you could obviously do that for inspiration for this book, but then there's about like, the entire alphabet and the Greek alphabet of steps you got to do in order to get to the end of the line there. Um, and you started kind of creating this book in 2021. Kind of for people that don't know or people that haven't picked up the book yet, which again, it's out everywhere. I'll put the links below for everybody. Make sure to go check this out. It's great. And what I like about it is it's very dense, like as far as the narrative and the character building and all that, but it's you're not asking somebody to read a 600-page book either. Like it's a very like accessible length, which is really great for I think stories like this. But yeah, kind of give people the pitch of like what is this book, like who are the characters, and kind of speak to it broadly.
Yeah, absolutely. I try to get it published traditionally for like a long time, so I have no shortage of experience trying to pitch it, which is super funny. But yeah, the title of the book is Unspectacular. As Brandon said, it's a nice short read, which is very much by design. I was going to say, actually, that's something from songwriting that translated directly, where I was like, the better a song is, the less time you're like expending forcing a listener to say what you have to say. Like, if you can make it shorter, then everything you said in the book or the song is meaningful. So, anyway, I think it's about 200 pages. It's a nice little paperback. Yet it is primarily a dual narrative. So it's two different people for most of the story who are telling the story. The primary protagonist, her name is May. She lives with her mom. She's 20, lives in suburban Chicago in like the present day, like arbitrarily. I said like February 2024. So essentially it's happening, right now. And she's a very, very gifted vocalist who is not really interested in doing music as any sort of job or like academic pathway. But she gets a lot of implicit and explicit pressure at home to, I would dare say, capitalize on her ability to do music and do something she doesn't really want to do just because she's good at it. So she's who I would call Unspectacular's main character. There's a second main character who comes in, after a handful of her chapters, and his name is Ajay Chadana, and he also lives in Chicago and is a software engineer. He's approaching 30 and has a lot of kind of like neuroses about his physical health because he's like a little bit obsessed with like aging. And by night, he's a drummer. And so, and I'm sure you know people like this too, kind of has like a day job that you need to take seriously in order to put bread on the table. And he's like, I have to go out every night and do gigs. Some of the gigs are cool. A lot of the gigs are ones I don't really want to do, but I'm a drummer and I need to like make money to afford my apartment. And the thing that their two narratives have in common is that they're both trying to reconcile music as a journey with like the other parts of your everyday life. So anyone that's lived in the arts world has had to do that tussle. Like it'd be impossible if you hadn't had that personal struggle.
Yeah, yeah. I thought it was really interesting, kind of the both like completely separate, internal struggles of both of these characters, and yet how they're very similar as far as like the, feel pressure, feeling internal, like an internal like dichotomy of what you're supposed to be doing, pressures of the outside world, the commodification of music and art in general, and like you said, capitalization of art in general. I thought like first and foremost reading May's first couple of chapters, I was struck at how quickly you were both able to put somebody in the headspace of like this, like you do a good job of having the characters change the voicing, where she very much comes off as like this very intelligent young woman, but it reads like like a 20-year-old woman's like internal thoughts of like, their recluse mom is putting all this pressure on them. This sort of like stepdad slash lawyer slash begrudging roommate is putting all this pressure on the actual producer that she goes to. Similar thing of like this very like what I think a lot of like people in the DIY scene or alternative scene would call like this, him and Robert are the like sort of suits of the music industry in a lot of ways.
Totally. Yeah.
Was that like I guess was that like a very, I mean, I know the answer to this question, but was that like a very inherent direct focus on this, was kind of pointing out this struggle of not just this person who just because she's good at something is being pushed to commodify it, right? But also this sort of like inherent almost separate soullessness that can come in at the professional level of music. Was that something that was like a big intentional focus when you first started writing this, both for that character and Jay?
Yes. Yep. This is a black and white answer. When I set out writing Unspectacular, like I wanted to write a novel about the private struggles associated with music as a vocation, as a life choice, or in May's case, like not even really her choice, right? And all the trappings that go along with that. And in letting all of that and like kind of flow charting all that stuff, how to write about it, it kind of presented itself very quickly how much of that does have to do with like, will this be commodified? If so, what kind of like personal sacrifices am I going to have to make? Me, myself, like I play with a very, very, very wide variety of like different musicians and different life stations at different ages. And as much as I hate to say it, like I've seen all kinds of that soul sucked thing rear its head. Now, I wouldn't essentialize anybody and be like, someone's soul was sucked away. Like that would be ridiculous. But you see all kinds of like bubbles of it, right? Like you sit in green rooms talking about things, you gripe when you're like in the car driving to gigs, and there's like, that flavor gets in there because like we chose a lifestyle that is objectively very difficult, And you see it on the internet all the time, right? People just complaining about like what it means to either be your own manager, try to find management, and do all this stuff associated with like trying to make it. So I think having all those things just creep into a lot of people's lives wasn't hard to have it, you know, make its way to the forefront of the book also.
Yeah, of course. I think anybody, whether it's like yourself who does music a lot more prolifically than I have ever been able to do or had the mental fortitude to do. But I think
No
when
fortitude. I don't even know what fortitude is.
but you know what I mean? Like it's such at the forefront of so many things, especially, make this book, you have this book set in present times. I don't think there's any more of a existential period for art with so many different things going on, that not only are you dealing with these people's internal struggles, but you're looking at the reality of sort of like, at least from like the corporate level or like the sort of monetized level, like a dying industry in a lot of ways, right? Like where these people, part of the reason at least what I got from it, or maybe this is just adding things onto characters in my head, which is fun to do when you're reading books, is
Yeah.
I'm probably going to pronounce his name wrong, but Javi
Yeah.
or Robert, those
You got
kinds of
Robert's
people.
name right too. They're both great.
Yeah, yeah. um they're both, they're both at this very professional level in the music industry or in the entertainment world, and yet, they're part of what you can look at least for me in May's case of this book, is that they're pushing so hard for this young woman because she's got this naturally amazing voice that, I like in the book that you have her talk, and numerous times people are just like, that voice, it's kind of like this like very like almost like messiahistic like look at her as far as her natural voice is, that they're probably also struggling to grab onto that because they need something successful, because things are so difficult even for successful, really talented musicians to make a living career, right? So I love all of that within the book, again, in a very concise format. Another thing I wanted to ask a little bit about with Jay's story is, you mentioned in the kind of pitch you sent to me initially with this, and I think it was a big part of the book as well, was talking about kind of the different pressures that come with him being a first generation immigrant. Can you kind of speak to where like the inspiration for that came from and the specificity? I don't want to like give away the book. I think people need to read the book. We're not going to explain everything about it here, but kind of where that angle comes into it here, because I found that very fascinating within his chapters and his narrative as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And the giveaway thing is so funny because like every interview I've done, they'll be like, no spoilers, right? But I'm going to try to ask you questions like, how do you get specificity about a piece of fiction writing without giving away the ending?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so like my family's first generation Indian immigrants. So my mother's parents and she, when she was an infant, came over in the very early 60s to California and then Wisconsin and then Iowa, which is where they currently reside. And I think from the beginning, interposing parts of what that type of family story means is something that was always going to be very important to me. I also just think there's so much inherent value in any immigrant story for a lot of different like socio-political reasons. I also just think for like character archetypes, it's like someone had to give up a lot of things to get to go to somewhere else and in some cases be someone else. And I feel like there's always like a heartstrings thing in there, at least for me. I feel like most people, it means something to them, whether that's been part of your own like personal experience or not. So I guess I don't find it surprising that that like important stuff like found its way to the heart of the novel very quickly.
You said you never realize how difficult it is to kind of weave all these narratives into a book. I tried that a couple of times myself over the years, and then same thing as you. It was like, holy shit, this takes so much work to kind of make sure you're one putting in all the narratives and the influences you want, but also making it cohesive and not like smacking you over the head with what you're telling people within the novel. Put in bold, I guess, within this book. Were there anything specifically that you tried to include to kind of boost that kind of side of the story?
Yes, that's an awesome question. The first thing that leaps to mind, and I'm honest, yes, what am I trying to say? The first kind of like symbology that I wanted a J to have from like the very beginning of starting to write this novel was duality. Everything's in pairs, duality. But the two that leap to mind the most immediately, one is if you immigrated to the United States from another country, you already have these kind of two identities. And in many cases, you are asked or expected to assimilate and to say, I'm going to kind of like take on the values of the place that I'm living now, which is not an inherently evil thing. It's just something you have to do to survive. And then you talk to your family in the old country and they kind of like expect you to retain a lot of the cultural values that you've had, but they also want you to succeed in the new place. And so you're always having this internal struggle of those two sides of you. So for him, that's the primary thing. And then the other, I would say, obvious one is because he has two jobs, one of them being music, one of them being in like kind of a stuffy and sometimes humorously boring corporate environment where he has like a leadership position. It's not just having two jobs, it's like that very serious like code switching, right? And
Hmm.
you read the book, so there's this like really stifling, weird intensity whenever he has to go to his manager's office and kind of like play the character who's like eager to be there, but also like isn't overstepping because he doesn't want to hurt her authority. And then he has to show up at night and like take off his like khaki pants and like nice shirts and look like he's a rock drummer. So those are his dualities. And I think with the Indian immigration specific stuff, I made reference to there was like some kind of division of state that they did called bifurcation within the state that I found that I had to be from. Partition is like a major part of history in that part of the world that actually has a lot to do with why my family came over. And both of those things are like socio-political instances of like literally something being divided in.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I with the book I started a lot with symbolism, and I think for him I'm like that stuff is so core to his being that
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think his character I found fascinating in that like you said, everything's twos with him. Where like even within one of like you said the code switch, like even when you're in the quote unquote, his software engineer mindset at his job, there's still these sort of dichotomies you have to do within that I think was like super relatable, regardless of where, your background or whatever else, that people do that on a like second by second basis, especially in a professional environment. And I did appreciate the thing about the switching of like literally needing to almost like switch your costume
Close.
between your two lives. As you know, I'm sure you relate to this too, but for me, especially when I was like student teaching and playing in a touring band, there would be instances where I couldn't do that, and so I would like leave, drive an hour and a half to a gig in Chicago from out west here, northwest of Illinois, and you'd show up at like this dive bar wearing like a cardigan and your khaki pants and just like look so luckily I still had my plugs, so there was a little bit of an instance that it seemed like you belonged there, but it's funny to kind of see that in a book format. I related to that so strongly, so immediately.
Yeah, that's a good I just feel like everyone's had that experience specifically. Yeah, not quite the same just because everyone I hang out with is like in art world, but like I don't have makeup remover at home. And like two of the bands I'm in, we always do eyeshadow. I'm accustomed to usually having one full day after one of those gigs where I just look like a much more emo like version of myself, which is already not a far cry. But it'll be
Yeah.
like, no, people are like, that looks good. And I'm like, well, we just played Saturday night and I don't currently own makeup remover. And I'm kind of just like, I get a full day of wearing eyeshadow, which like I'm not mad
Yeah.
about. But it's kind of like that where you're like, this is me for today. I'm
Yep.
dressed like a student teacher, even though I'm playing like a rock show, which
Yep.
is
Yep.
also a vibe. Like, I think there's a romance in that, right? People are like, I'm going to look really gross at the gig because my job required me to like haul boxes all day. And it's like, that's the life we chose. It's kind of hard out here, but there's a romance in it, I think.
I think so too. I think it's your and you show this in the novel as well, but just somebody that's so, you know, um if you have a career, whether it's like you said, whether you're working in a warehouse or you're doing, software engineering or you're a teacher or whatever, like there's still this part of your brain that like is just separated from all that is like the artist side of you, and yet like that's not how life works. Everything's fluid. And so it is funny to like see him in this and just both relate to it too, that there's certain moments where like those things cannot be separated, which is a sort of another lesson of this book, that like that's the struggle for him, right? Is like as he's furthering along in this career, he's finding it harder and harder to do something that, like you said, he enjoys as far as the session drumming work goes, and that's kind of how he's connected to May in this, and how he's introduced. But even, I'm kind of going on a tangent as usual here, but I just talked to a band from Nashville, right? Like where they, a lot of them have had to work on Broadway for years, or like they're like prog rock instrumentalists, but then they'll go have to play like an acoustic set at some bar doing honky tonk stuff and all that. And that's a little bit of like what you were saying with Jay here, where he, it's not even like he necessarily gets to do his sort of soul crushing tech job and then go do these fun, always fun, fantastic gigs as a drummer. So I think that's another relatable thing as like the working musician, is you might end up finding yourself in a situation where the kind of night writing of being a musician, you end up making that into almost a, you don't want to call it soulless, but like another soulless career. And like, am I getting something out of this? I thought that was like a very good, like relatable angle there as well.
Yeah. Yep. And I think that unglamorous aspect, right? That's like mostly where the title of the novel derives. It's like that side of things people don't necessarily see. But typically, if you've done music as a job, like we've all done that, where you're like, I just drove 2.5 hours to play music I don't like. Fortunately, I'm not in that situation like right now, but I feel like a
Uh-huh.
lot of people have been, where you're like, why did I say yes to that? I can't remember. And there's opportunity cost with everything. So some of it is like, why did I sacrifice, perfectly good Saturday afternoon for this and that? Or like you're exhausted from student teaching, and what you'd probably rather be doing is like, face planting your couch. But you're in the car, again.
Yeah, and that's again, like I think, if I'm not wrong, and I said this earlier, but like the overall theme of this is sort of that stress of keeping art, or keeping what you do as a passion, to keep, to actually do it for the love of the art, for the love of music, and for kind of for yourself. That's what I liked about May's side of it so much, is like I liked at the very beginning of the book where she said at the beginning she only likes to sing for herself. She doesn't even, the very first story where they had her, you have her in this venue, which I love the name of the venue. I should have put down the name of it here at the very beginning. It was like something failures, I think was
Genuine
yeah,
failures.
yeah, genuine failures. I love that so much.
It also
And
sounds
she,
like realistic to me. Like you
oh
would
yeah,
play there, I would definitely play there.
yeah, like a venue that's named and almost insults the person that's playing there. Yeah.
Literally, like, yeah. Yep.
But I love that, like, the character there on stage tries to bring her up on stage, and you get into this a little bit later of the reasoning, but then she just instantly leaves and vomits, right?
Yeah, she
Like,
gets,
rather
like,
than what.
sick.
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
that's a theme for her throughout it as well. So I guess was that like sort of the core for both of these characters, and you have Emily and Johnny in it as well, that have their own narratives within the story. Was that like the crux of this? Was kind of like looking at these things from very different angles of just seeing like how music and art can kind of go by the wayside of like what's most important for an artist, which is enjoying what they're doing, in and of itself.
Yeah, I think that's near the center of the novel. I think that's, like, a really, really, really big part of it, is that near dead center for the book, right? And I keep coming to that concept of balance, artistry versus, like, every other part of your life, which isn't just jobs, right? Like, for May, it's family dynamics. For Ajay, in some cases, it's also family dynamics. Their physical health is, like, a through line for each of them, but in very different ways. Down to the level of just like routine, right? My day to day living. Like, what does all that kind of boring quotidian stuff mean? How do I get it to fit? And most people can't get it to fit perfectly. In fact, I don't know anybody who does, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, I could keep going on this for forever because I love this book. I'm actually reading it for a second time now.
Are you
But
really?
yeah, yeah. Because I that's how my like ADHD brain works. Is I
You
have
gotta
to
like
read.
take it in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this. Would you mind kind of because I like to do that with people, and I think it enhances the book a little bit to talk about this. You had sent over specifically your songs in between years and Molly's song that
Yeah.
talk about the evil power structure horrific impacts in our day to day lives. And while that's obviously more of like a socio-political at large topic, I think that also is something that's within the kind of tensions within the book as well, broadly, like with these narratives. Could you let start with In Between Years here. Could you tell me a little bit about this song, what the background is for this one, and the kind of lyrical, I guess lyrical intents of it?
Yeah, I would be really, really happy to. And yeah, the main reason I sent those two songs to you was more because I appreciate the vision of your podcast. And I was
Yeah.
like, well, if you end up reading this email, you'll see that I've written about kind of just what it means to live in like the currently dying empire that we're living in. And for my like artistic sensibilities in both of those songs, like what I end up writing, what's really borne out is like its negative effects on people's like day-to-day lives in a way that I think some people might think, oh, that's like actually kind of boring to write about. But to me, it's like, well, what is the interior of like this person's problems, right? Like it really sucks that we're living when we are, where we are. And I think for some people who don't even think about that stuff all that much, it's still just like kind of negatively impacting them. So in between years, the first verse is written in how, and I don't say this in the song bluntly, I kind of suggest it, but it's like these two people that are, so I wrote the song in August 2020. I should add that. So it's these people that are like on a first date, like during COVID, and there's like nothing to do basically. And so they're like trying to have a conversation, but there's nothing to catch up on because nothing's going on. And then every chorus describes what it's like to have to live in a country that's actively falling apart. And the chorus is, what TV have you been watching while our country falls apart? And then the rhyme scheme changes every chorus because like I always do that. But that's the suggestion, is like the impact on all the really horrific stuff that our federal government has done to us has us stuck like watching television, which is a recurring thought that everybody's had. And the song ends, there's a coda that gets like significantly darker from a mental health standpoint, which I don't feel the need to voice right now. I guess I'd rather people listen to it. It's pretty dark. But yeah, the reason I sent that song to you is I think mostly because of the vision of your podcast. I was like,
Yeah.
that's really, I would say probably my only bluntly socio-political song, but I just kind of couldn't help but write it. That was one of those that like poured out of me. And the last thing I'll say on that too is like, well, I wrote it 4.5 years ago and we revitalized it for the stage in January for the book release. And I keep saying on stage, I'm like, it really sucks that we brought this song back because it's relevant. I was kind
Mhm.
of ready to be like, I'd love for people to listen to it, but it didn't always fit with like performances. And now it's like, you know what? All that stuff is still true, and it hurts to say, but it's just still true, you know?
Yeah, I remember, it's funny, like we talk about 2020 like it was, I think a lot of people now we have such like goldfish brains that we talk about it like it was some faraway thing that occurred. Now at this point, people talk about COVID like it's an afterthought, that the lockdowns basically didn't, it's like barely like not, it's like not even in like media much anymore. People have kind of like really moved on in a profound way that is kind of mind boggling to me. But I do appreciate that you kind of referenced that whole thing of in 2020, the super relatable thing of people either going on dates or trying to hang out with friends, maybe even remotely or whatever. And after a while, you literally have nothing.
Ran out of
It,
stuff to talk about, you know?
yeah, yeah. I remember some of my friends and I would try like on our lunch breaks to like all Zoom and like, we might have had a beer because you're all working remotely and no one's paying attention to what you're doing anyway in 2020 or whatever it was.
For
But
sure.
yeah, but like after a while you're all just kind of sitting there like we literally like it was kind of like an existential moment one time where we were like what do we what are you gonna say, like the world is literally stopped and here we are just watching everything become horrible. But I know, I mean, I say this way too often on this podcast when I talk to people about their social political songs, that unfortunately it's timeless, right? Like, unfortunately, you will probably revisit the song in 2028 and it'll be relevant then, and you'll probably revisit it in 2030 and it'll be relevant then, because until things systematically change, and people's like daily lives actually can improve and you can see a tangible improvement, like we just live in sort of like a really really mundane uh you know circle that slowly sinks to the bottom, right? So
Yeah.
that's my yeah, that's my optimistic pitch for the song. No, but I mean like that's where like songs like these, while it's not like you said, like while you wish you could just like have people listen to it and maybe not even totally connect with it, that would be awesome in a way. Almost like it's a great song that I think is very relatable. And also again, there's that sort of connection and through line to the book of this kind of purpose. Like where's purpose, where's the thing that's going to make me feel fulfilled, right? And we're in society, both within the context of your book and reality here, that there's a lot of structures, both social and political, that keep people from that, right? Like there is like a through line, I think, there for the book. Maybe I'm reading too much into that, but I think there's a lot of connections there for sure.
Try me. Whenever someone's like, "Am I reading into this too much?" I'm like, "Well, I obsessed over every word for, like, untold hours, so, like, most like, in my opinion, you're not, just for how I operate as an artist." But I never intended that those songs and the novel to, like, be connected,
Right.
but I don't think any artist can avoid recurring themes, right? Like, both of
Mm-hmm.
them are literally, like, you're living in a world that features a lot of like declining institutions.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm more interested in writing about is how those impact people's like personal mental health journeys and people's just like basically ability to function. That kind of interior life, day to day struggle stuff, right? That's the world that I know. And so that's what I'm like capable of writing about. And it's what I
Yeah.
think is, like, relatable for people, which to me is kind of the only important thing in my body of work is, like, can someone relate to it?
Yeah, I think that's a really important angle that sometimes gets lost when people do like social critiques within music or within books sometimes too, where people will kind of look at the big picture of things like policy or a war or like the biggest volatile conflict going on that you might see in the news or whatever the case may be. Like again, that's like the kind of angle I do. I think that's all fine and good if like that's the kind of art you make, but I think there's something to kind of looking at, well, the world's burning. How is that making my neighbor feel? What is their
Literally.
experience on a day in and day out? And like that actually shows you what is impacting people. So in some ways, it's more of like a, I don't know, like conscious, critique of the world around you than maybe somebody that gets things from headlines or reading like a news article or something like that. Is that you're literally taking the world around you as you see these broader issues going on and see how it affects them. I think that's really cool.
Thank you.
Yep. So I guess, yeah, I don't. Again, I really encourage everyone to check out the book Unspectacular, the first novel from Zaq Baker that's been out since January. I guess without me again giving away every detail of the book, I feel like I've talked about a lot of the influences and a lot of the themes here pretty well with you, and I appreciate you taking the time to do that. What are there any other things you would really like for people to kind of hear the backstory of, or kind of the details to if they haven't read the book yet that you think might kind of spark their interest or get them to pick up a copy?
Yeah, great question. Something I come back to a lot, and I think we've touched on the theme in this conversation too, but so many music novels deal, I think, with fame in like a very direct way. That's a trajectory people understand really well, whether it's like literally Spinal Tap or like, a lot of true stories, right? I've read a good handful of music novels that have a pretty, and there's nothing wrong with this, but like a archetypal, right? Like, oh, we started out from nothing. We met one another while we were very young. Then we got famous, and then fame was really hard for us. And that was the reason that things declined, because people struggled with like addiction, with romantic infidelity, with all the stuff that comes along with like these ego ebbs and flows that have to do with the fame. And the books will talk about like stadium shows and big buses and, marriages that are taking place in big houses and that sort of thing. And partially because it's the world I live in, I wanted to write a novel that is about like very much the sort of underside of all of that, which is to say original artists that are just like playing in bars because those are the gigs they get, and trying really hard because they just are trying really hard, not really for a lot of other reasons. And for someone like May who doesn't even want it. That to me is weird. It's not an experience I ever had, to be like someone else is making me do art as a vocation. So, yeah, if I think you asked for like a reason people would think it was compelling, and I think to me it's like showing that what I would consider like a massive world that maybe people that don't live in that world don't necessarily see it. That kind of like underbelly side of like the music world. People are just like scraping.
No, I that was my kind of thought reading through this as well. Is I think I said this maybe at the beginning too, but it's the first book I've kind of come across that has it's a fictional narrative about two different people within sort of the music community at large with very different perspectives, very different backgrounds, and sort of this contention that is very universal to like the working class musician or just like the working class person. It's not this glammed up, like you said, with Spinal Tap or some Beatles doc. People that are very relatable, both with their whether it's a borderline hypochondria, or it's actual health issues, or it's trying to focus on something while you're working sort of a menial day job, and all those internal struggles. I think it's the most relatable piece of like you know fiction that I've read related to like anything with music that I've come across before. So I think that's a good pitch to people that makes this book Unspectacular pretty unique. You know what I mean, as far as like the novels you can come across with the music community in general.
Yeah, well, and that's where the title derives, right? That's like a part of music people don't see, is what is unspectacular. And the other part of it is May's kind of like self-avowed nihilism, where it's like,
Yeah.
I don't want to be famous. Like, I want to be unspectacular. I'm just like this person, you know? And so that's where the title comes.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and it's a good way to like wrap up, all in all, what the kind of perspective of the novel is in a really good way. Well, Zach, again, thanks so much for going over all this with me. Again, the novel is Unspectacular, out now. I'll put links where people can find it. Obviously, you can find it on Amazon, but are there specific? You've got the links on your website where people can find it locally in Minnesota. Is there like another? Is there like a preferred place that you like people to go to if they are ordering this book? Is Amazon the place to go, or is there like a different sort of independent bookstore?
Yeah. The Amazon thing is bizarre. And it's like people like us can have this conversation, right? Where I don't know if this is better or not to say. I don't even use them as a customer for like ethical reasons. And I
Yeah,
have
yeah,
for like it's probably 17 years, just like won't do it. But with that being said, they like actually are very forgiving in terms of having like the distribution be really wide and to not have it compete with anybody. So like if someone doesn't live anywhere near me and wants to buy the book, that's like legitimately the best way for them to buy it. What I will say, and I'm very fond of doing this, and I'll do it with people like you, like I'll mail it to people very
right.
happily. Like obviously I have a box of them, more than one box. in my apartment because of the tour and because I sell them locally and because I bring them to bookstores locally. So if anyone was like, "Oh, well, I'd much rather have it with like a handwritten note," I will do that like in a heartbeat. I think it's kind of fun. Like they know me at the post office now. I'm like, "Hey, Fred, what's up?" They're like, "Zach, you're still mailing your book to people." I'm like, "Yep, there's a random journalist in, heaven knows where that's interested in reading it." Or fans, so I'll mail it out of state. So if someone watches this interview and is enchanted with the idea, I'll super just mail it to them. It's like
Absolutely. Well, then that you heard it here first. Make sure to flood Zach's DMs for
good.
requests for
I read my
absolutely.
DMs. I do. Like I fall
Yeah.
behind, but I do actually look at them. Like, you know.
Right. Well, and that's fantastic. Talk about like a DIY approach to selling your, getting your book out there as well. I absolutely love that aspect of it too. But again, all those links below, both Zach's website, where you can find the book on Amazon, as well as where to find Zach on socials and things of that nature, will all be in the links below. But if you can just kind of also plug where people can find you, find your music, find your work, and then last thing is I always play a song at the end of the podcast, even though we primarily talked about your book. You can pick one of your songs from your catalog to play at the end as well.
Sure. Were you asking for me to plug right now? Basically,
Yeah,
is that
yeah,
So
yeah.
the name is Zaq Baker, ZAQ Baker, and very conveniently, that's my handle for like everything. So social media, honestly, great because I'm like very up to date and active there. So Instagram is ZAQ Baker. I'm trying to get my arms around TikTok. I'm a pretty theatrical person. I feel like I could do, whatever.
Oh yeah,
ZAQ Baker on TikTok as well. The website is zaqbaker.com. And then I think probably most importantly to me, all my music is streaming under that name. So whatever channel you use, it's ZAQ Baker. As Brandon said, I just dropped a new song in February on Valentine's Day. It's called Brie. It's about a person I happen to adore. And I put out like 3 or 4 different synth pop singles last year. And then before that, as you said, I have a good handful of album, and I got a bunch of music videos if you're into that. I have like a rockumentary that's just like 13 songs cut from like a big show we did for a big birthday that I had. So yeah, all the materials online under the same name.
perfect.
That's the plug. Social
Yeah,
media.
that's great plugs. It's always good to have a little bit of a unique, like a unique spelling to your name too, to where you can just actually use your name
Yeah,
as the tags. That's
it
that's
helps.
that's the way to go. Yeah.
Well, I could say the tour too. I don't know where
Oh
all your
yeah, yeah.
listeners are based, but in June, and all these dates are on my website. I made like a tab or whatever just for the tour. But from June 5th to 18th, I want to see if I can do this from memory. It'll be Chicago, Indianapolis, Akron, Providence, Rhode Island, Philly, Cambridge in Boston, Massachusetts, Hartford, Pittsburgh, and then back home. So
Yeah,
if
you got
you
it all
live,
right. Yeah.
well, you don't know. I don't know that I got them all right. I think I had them in order though. Like I'm
You did,
almost.
yeah. I pulled it up as you were saying it. You got them all. Yep, and you got them all right. Yep.
Yeah, well, you can tell how like heads down, knee deep I've been in booking it because it's like I shouldn't have that memorized. That's crazy. But yeah, if you're a PowerLess like fan and listener and you live in those places and you came out and saw me, my heart would be so full. That would be like honestly amazing.
Absolutely. And again, all of those details will be in the notes below for people to find on YouTube or wherever else you listen to podcasts. But last thing, again, Zach, thanks so much for coming on and breaking down your book and a little bit of your music as well. What song do you want to play at the end of the show for people to hear for the first time?
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about one that would like fit with our conversation, but I want to play the one that's my favorite. That's also the newest one. And it is about the experience I had falling in love relatively recently, about a year ago, I should say, with my amazing life partner, who, by the way, did the book cover. So it
Nice.
does relate in that way. If you want to show off the cover one more time.
Yeah, yeah. I'll make sure to like put a nice PNG of it somewhere on here as well.
Amazing. Yeah, her name is Brie and she's an absolute treasure. So I wrote this song for her and it came out like 2 months ago. So brand new.
Perfect. Well, we'll play the song Brie from Zaq Baker on the PowerLess podcast to end this off after talking about his new novel.
I'm so used to introducing albums. That's like how I played a show for a book. Like that's a good thing. It's fine.
Yeah, right. New novel, Unspectacular, which you can buy everywhere now. Zach, thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you. It's been really fun. Really fun.
I think I understand those love songs, at least the sensations they describe. never thought I was above it all, but I was made to feel afraid of all the mess inside. But breathe, I love to listen to you explain anything. You make me see through my own eyes the joy in everything. And now I'm doing mental math to see you every time it's possible. I'll send you updates from the rental van. My face lights up when my phone lights up as I leave the venue in Chicago. And breathe, you caught me by surprise, and you caught me glancing constantly. How did we arrive? What were the chances to